Welcome everybody. We're going to talk about a project comparing proto-narratives in Dive Plus. I noticed there are some doublings with Harris over here, but I'll get over it quickly enough. First, I'll be talking about the problem context in a research question, and I'll be doing it by explaining exploratory research, what narratives are, and how Dive Plus fits into this. Then Ferdi will be talking about the prototypes we made, the methods we applied, and the visualizations that came out of it, and he'll talk about the conclusions and what further research is needed. First, it's important to note that almost all searches are exploratory. Users employ exploratory strategies and information gathering to get new knowledge or newly discovered connections. However, for researchers, there are some specific problems. First, humanities researchers have an exploratory phase of their research, wherein they're not exactly familiar with what's information out there. So information gathering in this phase is focused on recall. It's focused on getting as much relevant information as possible. This to combat the uncertainty in the information gathering. Namely, I don't know what information is out there, I'm not sure if my research question is really doable, and this often results the information gathering in slight or bigger changes in the research question. Well, Dive Plus moves beyond a query response paradigm, which is quite common in search engines. Usually you perform a query and you get a response of which the first link is the most relevant link. If you type into Google, what's the nearest sushi restaurant, you want to know what the nearest sushi restaurant is and not other context information. If on Google you're on the second page, your query was probably wrong. So this is a system that focuses on precision. However, by using the linked data from the Dutch Cultural Heritage Institutions, Dive creates a semantic network which can be explored through the links between the entities in the network. These linked data, the annotation of the linked data, have provided sort of a context of the objects of the cultural heritage institutions. And this context could be described as sort of a prototype narrative. The backbone structure or the context wherein an object is located, which can be used to produce an actual narrative. And researchers do this by selecting which links they think are relevant for the structure of their end product. Harris already mentioned it, but Dive is centered around, or the central concept in the semantic network in Dive are events. And why is this important? This is important because events are the building blocks of a narrative, the usual outcome of humanities research. A narrative is commonly defined as a linear representation of a chain of events in text, and this serves to explain causality. Relevant links are highlighted while random occurrences are discarded. Well, what can Dive Plus at this point do, according to us? It can provide that backbone structure of the eventual narrative. By selecting events and the entities that belong to them, and visually representing it, you can sort of get a feeling of what your narrative, what the structure of your narrative is going to be. Dive Plus now looks like this. As you can see here, you have your exploration path. These are the entities that you selected and that are linked, and here you can see more information about it. But at this point, it is not possible to really work with the end product of the exploration path. I think it's possible to export it, but we thought it would be more useful for users to be able to compare these end products of your exploration with other users.
So we devised a method to develop a prototype which could solve these solutions, and we had a few guidelines in mind. Firstly, foremost, we had to keep the dive goals in mind, and also the dive goal in the Chloria Media Suite context. Chloria Media Suite is a collection of tools that all have their designated task, and they ideally work together to form a total media suite with which you can, from start to finish, make an end product. So it's important to not overstep our boundaries, to stay within the Chloria and dive context, which means the exploration paths, as were already shown, and the automatic construction of proto-narratives. So we didn't want to go much beyond that. Furthermore, when designing the prototype, we had to keep the users in mind. These are digital humanities scholars, maybe not always the most tech-savvy people, so it's important to keep a set of design rules at hand, keep things clean, simple, to make sure it's intuitive to use and people won't get lost in the user interface. And finally, we had to make sure the product would be technically viable, so we wouldn't be doing some completely over-the-top stuff that would never actually work on a web-based website, because Dive Plus is mainly built with Java and HTML, so we had to keep those limitations in mind, but also the possibilities those tools offer. With this, we made a prototype. This is just one small addition we made to the existing exploration path, which highlights the event-centric nature of Dive. So instead of having the normal exploration path with all the steps from your search beneath each other, we sorted them per event. So we have the watersnood down here, and all objects and entities, so pictures and concepts that are related to that event are located under it. They're grayed out, so you can see they're part of that event. And then we do a little line space between the next event, so they're a bit more separated. It adds a little bit of more context and helps people differentiate between the number of events they have. Now, this is the meat of our prototype. This is the comparison of narratives, and we did this by using the existing proto-narrative structure that was in a few Dive design documents. What we can see here on the left side is the exploration path visualized as a narrative. You can see all the relations highlighted by the white lines, and you can see, for example, this image links two events together. This is very nice, but you want to compare it to other people. So you can see here on the right side of the page, this is another user. You can see that the narratives are pretty similar. They have the same events, but you can see these red highlighted events. Those are where the narratives differ, so you can quickly see which points are different between the narratives. Now, of course, you can't really see what the name is of this event. That's why when you hover over it, it'll show the name and also a similarity score. Similarity score is present because this offers a quantitative comparison. The similarity score is calculated by a simple mathematical formula, and it basically says, okay, it's 0.125% similar to other narratives. So other narratives that contain the event watersnood. If you would want to do a more qualitative comparison, you'd click on it and it will show you users that have similar narratives. And I don't know if you can see it, but the left side of this group of users is highlighted in green. It will show that these people have narratives that contain a lot of similar objects, and the red side is people that contain maybe the same events but have branching paths. So you can really see, okay, this person has completely different insights on this selection of events. That is, in short, our prototype. With the construction of this prototype, we've reached a number of conclusions. Firstly, this prototype needs to be user tested, because while this prototype is built on foundations of research that in theory should work, should prove that it's an easy to use tool and it fits in the Dive design, we don't know that yet. We need real life testing to show if it actually does work, because well, users can't really be predicted. Should this user test work, the hypothesis that could be tested would be comparing narratives in Dive Plus supports exploratory research and humanities research. I think that's time.
Yeah, very, very nice. I just want to start with your last slide. I'm very glad to see that you actually went into thinking about the user testing and what would be a hypothesis to test. Would have been even nicer if you actually put the hypothesis one level deeper into actually guiding, testing the actual suggestion. Quantitative comparison, qualitative comparison, how do they contribute to actually studying narratives better? So here you could maybe include also already in your final report a few other hypotheses that can help you imagine how those explorations on the narratives can contribute to explorative research or understanding better as a sub-hypothesis. Very nice. So another thing that I wanted to ask you on your prototype is what happens when they are, if I start doing this exploration, why do I need to see two narratives at the same time? I mean, when I explore one, do I need to see the others? And what happens when there are more than two at the same time?
I rushed through it. For the sake of time, didn't explain all of it. But basically, this is the narrative the user has. And when you start, it doesn't show anything here. But for example, I want to compare my Watersnoodram narrative with that of Harris. As you can see that one here. That way I can put them together and it will highlight the differences, so that's part of the qualitative comparison. If you want, you can save it. You can see it on the right side of the page. You have some saved comparisons. So if you want to compare multiple narratives on a qualitative way, you can save them there in the taskbar, so you can switch between them easily.
But it's only pair-wise comparison. I cannot compare three.
No, not at the same time.
I think we chose mostly for this because we thought otherwise it would get so cluttered, the screen.
Yeah.
I mean,
did you think of some kind of aggregation sort of to shrink and only show the differences?
At first we started our idea with the old dive. With which is basically a horizontal the links, so you would horizontally have the users and you could click them and then their narrative slides out. There was also an idea we played around with, but I think that this was more simple and
we
easier for
decided
AI.
to go for simplicity.
Yeah.
All right. So also here the same comment. State of the art is very important. It really, any solution you propose does not mean anything, zero to anybody, unless you, I'm not exaggerating, unless you actually have studied what others have done and know how it compares to the others. Nobody's going to invest the time. There's so many ideas and solutions out there, and only the ones that actually convince you this with some sort of empirical support that this will perform better or performs better versus the currently best performing ones, or this has never been done in the state of the art. It's much more convincing than going into depth into the idea and then figuring out somebody else done it.
Yeah, I think we've really tried digging around looking for examples, and we just haven't found them. That might be due to our query response use.
But then it's good to mention this. So not ignoring it is not. So it might be your own ignorance or incapacity of finding it, but it's good to basically show that you've done it.
Okay.
Because you don't show it means you haven't done it.
I will add that.
Life is not fair. Life is only what we see,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to grading.
Good one.
Okay.
All right, thank you very
We'll sort
much.
it out.
Sure.
Other questions?
Yeah, I have one, maybe a quick one. So this user testing. So how would you start doing the user tests from this point on? So let's say we think this is a good idea, and we want to do it, right? We hire someone to do it.
Yeah, well, we had this good quote in Beyond the Query Response Paradigm. It basically says if you want to test a tool that helps the exploratory search phase, you really also need to test it on those, if it offers those programs. It's a good quote, I don't know it by heart, but it gives us a lot of feedback points which we could test the users on. So basically we give them this page or start them at Dive Plus, go onto this page and basically ask them questions related to those points, see if they get positive results.
So it's a paper prototype.
Yeah, probably will be a paper prototype. Might be the fastest way to implement it.
With unlimited funds, I would guess that, a way like Sabrina Sauer and Dr. Hagendorn proposed in their proposal on lucid narratives, with first making sure that there is enough material in Dive for specific users to work with, and then see how these users use this. But then you would have to build sort of this already.
Yeah,
That's
so
maybe a bit.
I think it's possible to make an intricate enough paper prototype to answer at least a few of those questions.
Okay, thanks.
All right. So I'm putting feedback in the same place as I did before. If you have not finalized your reports, take this feedback and work it in as much as you can.
Okay.